So this is going to be a recipe to produce a large amount of ambient output from a material. I'm going to use one of these Stanford models again from the Stanford Scanning Repository. This one was converted by Horo using MeshLab, so I'll just bring that in. That's going to be the subject of my scene, and we're going to be using a true ambient render mode as well when we get round to it. So here's my Stanford Dragon, and I'm going to create a cylinder here, and that's going to be a light source. So this is the setup, and I'm just going to move the camera around so I've got things framed properly, and I'm also going to investigate the material of the dragon. So let's have a look at the dragon, go into the material lab, and you can see it's got a bit of ambient in, so we don't want any of that, so I'll just set it to default grey without ambient. So it's a very simple material. Ground's default grey, and this cylinder here, I'm going to modify this material so it's not diffuse but it is ambient, so that's giving out ambient, and that's driven by the global ambient here. So if I make that fully white, then we've got a white glowing pillar. Now I'm going to turn off the atmosphere and set that to fully black and disable the sun, so in theory the only thing we should see now is the ambient pillar, and as things stand in this render mode, it's not lighting anything else up. Since we're going to use transients, that's quite render intensive, so I'm going to change the document setup to a 1:1 ratio and reduce the size so it's going to render a bit more efficiently, narrow the field of view, and at the moment you can see still this is just black with this white blob. Right, now if I switch to rendering for premium effects, I'll just lower the raise per pixel for now, so I'll lower it to 16 so it renders more efficiency. Select true ambient, select scattering correction, and reduce the maximum ray depth to 4, and I'll show you now that you maybe just see there's a bit of light being given out by this cylinder, but it's not enough really to light the dragon. So I'm going to go into the render options now and select boost light, and hopefully that is going to show us a bit more light. Not significantly. So how can I get this to become really, really bright? Well, that's set at its maximum value. I can't increase that anymore. But in the material here, right, I'm going to control the ambient with a blob, and I'm going to go into the library by holding the shift key down and select from the basic selection this check blue. Okay, I'll just check out of that because it was Camtasia making the menus hang around, so you can see I've got check blue in there. Right, and as with the previous tutorial that I did with the velvety effect, though to be fair it looked more like satin as Rashad Carter correctly pointed out, but that's by the by. We're going to modify this material now so it gives us a profoundly negative output, which isn't going to be really helpful with ambient because we need it to glow, not be negative, but it still will drive it. So we'll start by setting that up. The reason I chose check blue is because there's no phase set, and in the final combination or in this one, and also the filters aren't set, so that's fine. So in here we just want the alpha output this time. I'm going to modify this so it's distance squared, mode is minimum, octaves 1, and frequency of -1. I don't think direction plays any part in this, so I'm not going to modify it this time. So that's giving us a profoundly negative output. However, if I move that across to the second component here and use difference, not subtraction, difference, and then in this first one set it to nothing, then when I give it an output using sine, here we go, so that's got an output now, the difference from the alpha will give us a positive value. So that was fully negative, the difference here will make it positive, so this is actually a very high positive output. So if we go back to the ambient now, this is being driven very hard, but the monitor can only display full white, so we can't detect that it's any brighter than it was before. However, when we render, you should see that we've got a tremendous amount of output from this, and you can see now if we switch the render options and we turn boost light off, you can actually detect the difference between the boost light render and the render without. So a couple of things to note here. If you set the colour of the global ambient, so if we set this to 1 green and no blue, because it's being driven so hard, it will appear yellow. So this is the green component's been pushed right up, and as I say, the monitor can only display a limited output. So you're really limited to primary colours when you're driving it this hard. So we can get red out of there, for example, but getting any fine divisions between them is going to be difficult. So I'll set that back up to white, and we'll try and solve the other obvious problem, which is that's not enough light, and when we use boost light, like so, then that's too much light. So we need to control this somewhat. So back into the material, back into the deep text editor, and we'll use this third component. If I transfer this one across into the third component and then use multiply, I can modify, oops, I need to modify this one, the final component here on the multiply. If I modify this filter down, so I'll just reset it so I can modify its output, then I can control the output and make it still extreme, but not as extreme as it was. So while we've got bands here, it's still giving us an extreme output, but the broader the bands get, I think these are negative values, or values that it can't read anyway. This is still a positive value, I suppose, but essentially while there's still bands, it's still giving us an extreme output, but we can moderate it somewhat. So that will be less extreme now, and we also have the option of scaling it through alpha scaling on this channel here. So by combining these two effects together, we can rein it in somewhat. So now it's at a lower level, then we can go, say, try 10, and we've still got the option of going into the deep text editor to try and control it as well. If that's proving difficult, we'll try 1. So it's a matter of experimenting with the values. So you've got some output, but not too much output. So it's looking a bit white on the front of the dragon there. So we could try 0.5. So now you can see we've brought it into a range where we can control the output. If I were just to go back into the material here and the deep text editor and disable the multiply channel at the end, then you will see what a difference having that in made. So too much light, and we couldn't possibly bring it into range using the scaling control here through the alpha scaling. So you need that final channel, and to multiply it down using just a sine output here on an empty component, just to bring it into a range where you can control it. So having done that, the final thing to do then is to render this with the full 256, and that should hopefully do something to mitigate the effect of the noise. And you'll see now we're in a position of lighting the scene from a single object through the ambient channel, and by using this scaling component from the texture component, the procedural texture component, it's possible to get enough light out of it now to light your scene up, which wasn't possible before. So there you go. I'll just let this render out, and that's the end of the tutorial. So I hope you found that interesting, and you'll go on to experiment with this effect. Likewise, any of these things can be used in different channels. So you can try it in transparency, and that will have the effect of inverting the shadow even when you've got zero transparency, because of the way transparency works with other channels. Metallicity and reflection, they can all be driven. Some of them will only be driven positive to some degree, and some of them can be driven both positive and negative. So you can actually put a negative ambient, well, it's not a light source, it's an anti-light source into a scene, and that itself will have a different effect on the way it renders, and it will work with true ambience as well. But using negative lights is very difficult, so I just thought I'd touch upon that before signing off. Okay then.